Lewis Hamilton officially finished fifth at the Hungarian Grand Prix, but that result hides one of the strongest performances of his Ferrari season. Hamilton qualified second, was dropped 3 places for obstructing Oscar Piastri, then fought back to fourth on the road. And just when it looked like he had rescued the weekend, 1/10 of a kilometer per hour changed everything. 80.1 in an 80 kilometer per hour pit lane. 5 seconds. 1 position lost to Charles Leclerc. And Hamilton's 4th penalty across only 3 consecutive race weekends. But here is the part most people missed. The penalties changed the classification. They did not erase the speed. Because beneath the grid drop, the pit lane sanction, and the frustrated radio message, Hamilton showed that Ferrari had real pace, that he could recover under pressure, and that 5th place tells only half the story. Subscribe to the channel. To understand what Hamilton really showed in Hungary, you have to ignore the final classification for a moment. 5th place does not tell the full story. It tells you where Hamilton ended up after every penalty had been applied. It does not tell you where the pace was. And that difference matters. Hamilton qualified second. That alone was significant. At the Hungaroring, a front row start is one of the most valuable things a driver can earn. The circuit is narrow, overtaking is difficult, and track position can shape the entire race before the first pit stop even happens. Hamilton had done the hard part. He had put the Ferrari exactly where it needed to be. Then, the first penalty changed everything. The stewards judged that Hamilton had obstructed Oscar Piastri at turn 1 during the final part of qualifying. The punishment was 3 grid positions. Second became 5th. That was the first moment the official result moved away from the performance Hamilton had actually produced. The lap was still real. The speed was still real. But the opportunity disappeared. And at Hungary, losing 3 places is not a small correction. It changes the entire race. From second, Hamilton would have had clean air and a direct view of the front. From 5th, he had traffic, more cars ahead, more disturbed airflow, more pressure on the tires, and fewer strategic options. Think of it like entering a narrow corridor. You may be faster than everyone around you, but if the path is blocked, your speed cannot immediately save you. That was the problem Hamilton faced. He had the pace. He no longer had the position. But this is where the first real clue appeared. Hamilton did not collapse. He did not spend the entire race trapped in 5th. He moved forward. He recovered to 4th on the road. That is the detail the final result hides. Hamilton had already repaired part of the damage. He had taken a weekend altered by a grid penalty and pushed himself back ahead. That does not happen without speed. It does not happen without control. And it does not happen if the Ferrari is fundamentally uncompetitive. The official classification says 5th, but the race itself showed Hamilton recovering. That is why the second penalty felt so brutal. During his 3rd pit stop, under the virtual safety car, Hamilton entered a pit lane limited to 80 kilometers per hour. The recorded speed was 80.1, 1/10 over. That tiny excess triggered a 5-second penalty, and those 5 seconds dropped him behind Charles Leclerc in the final classification. Hamilton crossed the line 4th. The record says 5th. Once again, the performance and the official result moved in different directions. And once again, the reason was not a lack of speed. That is the key. Hamilton did not lose 4th because Leclerc passed him. He did not lose it because Ferrari suddenly became slow. He did not lose it because he made a visible mistake in battle. He lost it because one measure number crossed an absolute limit by the smallest possible margin described in the source. 1/10. Almost nothing in normal life. Everything in Formula 1. That is why Hamilton's radio message carried so much weight. Handing out penalties like crazy. It was frustration, but it was also the sound of a driver watching the same pattern repeat. First, second became 5th. Then 5th became 4th. Then 4th became 5th again. The entire weekend moved in a circle. Every time Hamilton pushed forward, another official decision pulled the result backward. And this became his 4th penalty across 3 consecutive race weekends. That does not prove the officials were targeting him. It does not prove the decisions were wrong. But it does reveal the emotional pressure building around every result. A driver can accept losing through lack of pace. That is painful but clear. The car is not fast enough. The rival is stronger. The answer is to improve. This was different. Hamilton had shown the speed. He had shown the recovery. But the final position still did not reflect it. That is much harder to process, because it creates a dangerous feeling. The feeling that performance alone may no longer be enough. And here is where the story becomes more important for Ferrari. The team did not leave Hungary with a simple fifth-place performance. It left with evidence that Hamilton could qualify on the front row. It left with evidence that he could recover after being moved backward. And it left with evidence that the SF26 had competitive pace in his hands. That matters more than the classification suggests, because Ferrari's biggest question is not only where Hamilton finished, is whether the speed exists to fight higher up. In Hungary, the answer was yes. The penalties changed the result. They did not erase the underlying performance. That distinction may sound obvious. Inside a Formula One team, it is critical. Engineers do not review a weekend by looking only at the final position. They study qualifying pace, race pace, tire behavior, traffic, strategy, driver feedback, and the moments where time was gained or lost. Hamilton's fifth place cannot be analyzed like an ordinary fifth. The path to that result was completely different. He had the pace for second in qualifying. He crossed the line fourth. Then the penalties rewrote both numbers. That means Ferrari has two different stories to study. The story of performance and the story of execution. The performance was encouraging. The execution was costly. And if Ferrari solves the second without losing the first, the next result could look completely different. That is what Hamilton really showed. Not that penalties no longer matter. They matter enormously. Not that he was blameless. The confirmed infringements changed his weekend. What he showed was that the speed underneath those penalties was stronger than the final classification suggested. And that may be the most important message Ferrari could take from Hungary. A slow driver cannot recover lost positions. A slow car cannot place itself second in qualifying. Hamilton did both. He put the Ferrari on the front row. Then, after losing that position, he fought back on Sunday. The result was damaged. The performance was not empty. But here is the problem. Formula One does not award points for hidden performance. It awards points for the official result. That means Hamilton and Ferrari cannot simply celebrate what might have been. They have to remove the errors that allowed the penalties to take control of the weekend. That is where the pressure shifts. The pace question has an encouraging answer. The execution question does not. And Formula One is ruthless when those two things fail to connect. A driver can produce one brilliant lap. One obstruction can erase the reward. A driver can recover through an entire race. 1/10 in the pit lane can erase the position. That is the sport at its most unforgiving. 99 things can go right. One detail can still define the result. Hamilton experienced that twice in the same weekend. And the fact that he still showed competitive speed through all of it is exactly why this performance should not be dismissed. The penalties did not reveal a driver who had lost his edge. They revealed a driver still capable of creating opportunities, even when the weekend kept turning against him. That is a very different conclusion. It means Ferrari's challenge may not be finding more speed from Hamilton. It may be protecting the speed he already showed, protecting qualifying position, protecting track position, protecting the race from small procedural mistakes. Because if Hamilton begins from where he qualifies, and if the final result survives every official review, Hungary suggests the potential outcome could be much stronger than fifth. And this is where Charles Leclerc's position becomes important. Leclerc finished fourth officially. Hamilton finished fifth. That is the result that counts. But Hamilton crossed the line ahead. The source does not confirm conflict inside Ferrari, and there is no basis to invent one. Still, the comparison tells us something. The internal battle was closer and more complicated than the final order alone suggests. Hamilton's race pace was strong enough to finish ahead on the road. Leclerc's official result was stronger because Hamilton's penalty changed the classification. Both facts matter, and Ferrari has to evaluate them honestly. If it looks only at the final result, it may underestimate Hamilton's performance. If it ignores the penalty, it may underestimate the importance of clean execution. The real lesson sits between those extremes. Hamilton had the speed. He did not have a clean weekend. And the difference between those two things decided everything. That is why the phrase, "what Hamilton showed behind the penalties," matters. The penalties were the visible story. The hidden story was resilience, front row speed, recovery pace, and the ability to remain competitive after the weekend had already been compromised. But there is another layer, one that may matter even more in the next race. Hamilton now knows that the Ferrari can give him something to fight with. That changes confidence. A driver who believes the car is capable approaches the next qualifying session differently. He attacks more. He trusts the braking. He carries more speed. He stops thinking only about survival and starts thinking about opportunity. That confidence can unlock performance, but it can also create risk. The closer Hamilton gets to the limit, the more costly every mistake becomes. Hungary proved that brutally. A driver cannot win by staying far away from every boundary. He also cannot win if crossing one boundary destroys the result. Ferrari now has to help him find that exact balance. Aggressive enough to stay fast, precise enough to stay clean. That is harder than it sounds, because the same instincts that produce a front row lap can also create danger in traffic. The same desire to save time in the pit lane can reduce the safety margin to almost nothing. Formula One rewards drivers for approaching the edge. Then it punishes them when they step over it. Hamilton lived on both sides of that line in Hungary. He showed the reward. Then he suffered the cost. And that may be the real reason the weekend matters so much. It was not simply a bad result. It was evidence. Evidence that the Ferrari had more pace than fifth place suggests. Evidence that Hamilton could recover under pressure. And evidence that the difference between a strong weekend and a frustrating one may now be operational, not fundamental. That is a much more hopeful problem for Ferrari. A slow car can take months to fix. A weekend damaged by penalties can change immediately. One cleaner qualifying session, one safer pit lane entry, one result that finally matches the speed. That is the possibility Hungary revealed, but also created a new expectation. Now that Hamilton has shown the pace, fifth place will no longer be enough. Not for him, not for Ferrari, and not for anyone who saw what happened before the penalties changed the story. The next time Hamilton qualifies near the front, people will remember Hungary. The next time he enters the pit lane, people will watch the speed. The next time he finishes ahead of Leclerc, people will wait for the official classification.